I think we have this weird relationship to expression and creativity where it's like, I can only do it if I'm good at it. I can only do it if I'm the best at it. And it's like, that's just not true. And it doesn't mean you can make money from it. It doesn't mean that you can compete based on where you're at, but it doesn't mean that you have to be quiet. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to do this thing. It doesn't mean you have to be inactive. And I think that there's an important line of this conversation, which is that just because you're new at it, just because you're maybe not good at it, maybe just because you haven't had the best teachers, you haven't learned or whatever, or maybe you're behind everybody, doesn't mean that you don't get to play too.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Uh-oh. It's podcast time. Way of the Artist. I just wanted to make you laugh. So we're doing another one. We're recording another conversation for you about life and artistry and making something out of it. And this one is an important one actually to me. And you brought it up, Evan, and it's kind of your love child, but I actually am. This is one of those conversations that's very close to my heart. Those topics, but
well, I thought you would be game, with this one.
Yeah.
I knew. I'm like, this is right. Even though it's like a personally kind of relevant thing for me right now, I know this is right up Brandon's alley. I knew you were going to be on board for this one. I was mostly sure you were going to be on board.
Well, it's what we call in the film industry a one-take wonder. You just kind of knock it out of the park on the first try. You're like, I think maybe we should talk about this. And we're like, yeah, let's talk about that. That sounds great. And then you kind of even went off. And when I was listening, I've already decided we're doing this. But you were like telling me why, and you're filling in the story about like, why you think we should talk about it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just waiting for you to finish. I'm listening to you, but I'm waiting for you to finish to say like, thumbs up, let's do that. The title of this is What You Want, No Apologies. And I interpret that as, in some ways, being unapologetic about what you want. But also, I think there's more to that. You want to be mindful, I think, in the way that you approach this topic, because it's not about being a jerk or just kind of being selfish or entitled. It's about taking ownership and really stepping into yourself, stepping into your sense of power, your sense of purpose, and going for that, and not worrying about how people maybe, I want to say my part before I kind of let you jump in, but I just want to say it's about being unapologetic about being bigger than people maybe think you are, or maybe you think you are. It's about you taking some authority over something, something that's meaningful to you, and going for that and making something out of it. That's how I interpret it, because I think the imposter syndrome is a real thing, especially for artists and anybody who has a dream. And I think that each and every one of us have to face that. And I have some stories about some battles that I've had with this, but that's what we're talking about. And I think that if you have something that you've been like kind of waiting to embark on, or maybe you want to take whatever you're doing to that next level, I think this is a good kind of conversation, might open up some doors. And it's a conversation I kind of wish someone talked about when I was younger, more. And I don't know if we can get into that. I don't know if we're even going to be able to fill in the stuff that I want to fill in it for it, but I just think it's an important thing for people to hear. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, no, it's funny because this is the kind of conversation and the kind of topic that at one point in my life would make me feel very uncomfortable, and I wonder what people have thought when they clicked on this episode, if there's people who are like me, or what I've sort of felt about this kind of subject matter or title like this. Because there's a former version of me would have been like, ugh, like I can't stand this kind of stuff. Like there's an element of this sort of raw, just like smash through, just, there's, I don't know. I had a lot of ideas around kind of what this sort of no apologies sort of statement kind of entailed, like it brought up things of selfishness and being like an inconsiderate person, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something that's much deeper than that. I think we are, at least. But I just want to address that coming out of the gate, because, there are a lot of people who are, sort of motivational speakers or, inspirational talkers or whatever. And they do kind of fit that sort of model of like, what the fuck do you want? No apologies. You go for it, and blah, blah, blah. And, like that's
almost,
if
militant.
that works for you in terms of, going for what you want and your dreams in a way that doesn't, absolutely shit on the lives of other human beings, then absolutely fantastic. But that's only one sort of approach of this no apologies. And for me, this conversation of no apologies is really just about, we talk about claiming your own path, and claiming your own path is about having no apologies. It's about a sense of knowing what life is asking of you, which I see as being very much the same as what you actually and truly want. Normally, I think those things align, and the more you begin to know yourself and know who you are, the more that you begin to see that there's this parallel of what it seems like life is asking from you and what it is that you actually want are the same thing. They're this beautiful marriage. And when you start to get in touch with what that thing is, no apologies for it. No apologies for that thing. No apologies for your nature. No apologies for that thing that you are here to do in the world, for the way that you're supposed to serve and give value to all of us.
And not even just to everyone else, to yourself.
And to yourself, absolutely.
Like that's an important
You count
part
in all of this.
Yeah. Sometimes you're just doing something because you want to do it and it's fulfilling for you. I was listening to the Bill Burr podcast actually this morning, and there was a question that was sent in. He answers questions, and I actually like that part. It's one of my favorite parts of his podcast. His perspective on things, I think, is really interesting. And also, I think there's certain things that he has a lot of clarity about, which, he's an older guy. He's like in his 60s, right? So he has
really?
Yeah. So he's had quite a lot of life to, really like learn some things and look at stuff. And he's somebody who I at least admire from the point of view of like, I think he works really hard at being, a top tier comedian and also continuing to up his game. But for this particular thing, someone wrote in and they said, I'm 45 years old, and I've recently been really interested in painting. And I told my wife, and she's like, just totally ignored the question or comment and said, like, the shed's dirty, like it needs cleaning. And yeah, exactly. And he's like, so he goes, Bill, what do I do? Right. And Bill's advice was, he's like, basically he said, like, no apologies. You don't need to apologize that you want to get into painting, that you want to do this, and you're not too old. And he was basically making the point. He's like, the way you're telling me this, you're saying like you're too old to start something new. And it's like, that's not true. It's like, these are the things that are going to keep your mind growing and to keep you expanding. And they're going to keep you, like loving life. Otherwise you're going to get depressed. And he was kind of really pairing this whole thing with like, the alternative to you not doing painting, if that's what you want to do, is depression. And he was like, not so subtly, but subtly saying that's the alternative to you not following through with what's in your heart. And he said, talk to your wife and ask her what's going on about that, but understand that you're in the right here. And I totally agreed with him there. It's like, maybe there is we don't know that relationship, for example. We don't know all the details about that couple and how they interact and whatever's going on there. But at the end of the day, that person who wants to paint, no matter how old they are, and whether they're going to become some great Picasso or they're just going to paint for fun and enjoy it, it's like, that's something you want to do, and you don't have to apologize for that, because that's an expression of you. And anything that's like that, you do not need to apologize for, because your painting is not going to hurt anybody, and it's not going to, like, nobody has a right to be upset about that. That's their problem if they do, and it has nothing to do with you. So you don't need to apologize for that. And if if you take this question further, like, if your life is just cleaning out the shed, take that analogy almost further. It's like, what kind of life is that? Yeah, we have responsibilities. Yeah, we have stuff to take care of, but that's a lot of what these conversations are about. Like, where's the room for your expression? Where's the room for your art? Where's the room for you?
I mean, artistry itself, at least for me, is this expression of just like, there is something more to life than the hamster wheel that we are presented. There's just an interesting thing about what is the thing that compels people to make art in the first place.
Yeah.
To tell stories, to write music, to, create incredible images. There's like, why? Like, there doesn't seem to be any rational reason for it. It doesn't fit any of our sort of mechanistic survival needs, but it meets a certain part of our survival. I think absolutely. Like, it's part of our spiritual and soulful survival is what art is to me. It's like, is it necessary? No, but that's kind of part of what is so amazing about it, is because it's not necessary, but at the same time, it absolutely is.
What's interesting is, Gabriel Napora, he was on the podcast back when we were the B&E, right? And he talked about movie producing, and it's a great talk. And if you guys are interested in that, you should
this is the second time we brought him up recently. So
yeah, I know.
think it's a sign that we should probably reach out to him and have a conversation with him again.
I think it would be great to get him on and just get him to talk about the film industry and art in relation to COVID and what's going on in the world today. Because I was having a great conversation with him, and he gets quite passionate actually when he talks about the film industry. He talks about art, and it's amazing because he's a real producer, like a real money guy, right? Like a real make it happen, the crunch the numbers, get the people together, package the film, gap that financing. He's like that guy. But at the same time, he's this artist who's like, and he was saying to me, he's like, this is an essential service. And he's like, I really think the world's going to come out of this and they're going to see film as an essential service, because just look how many people are watching Netflix or watching Amazon or watching whatever Prime. They're like, and this is such an important part of us coping with what's going on in the world and us dealing and us processing. And it's such a shared thing. I mean, every time I go out and talk to people, or every other time, we're talking about, we'll have a mention of a movie or some comedian show we saw or some show we're watching, right? And these things are very important and they're fundamental in our lives in a lot of ways.
Well, what's also kind of a crazy little thing around that too is that I feel like in so many ways there's more truth to be seen in like a great scripted film or TV series than you can often find in the news.
Yeah.
It's like you can, like, it's almost more clear and more like, there's something, because at the core of storytelling and movie making and art is to really try and tap into the universal humanity that we all share. It's not about the divisiveness that we're being fed on a daily basis through whatever it is, whether it's through mainstream media, whether it's through your social feed on whatever, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is that you're onto. Like, it's insane. It's kind of insane when you think about it. But like, it's a place where we can go and in some ways we can find refuge, and almost more than ever now.
Yeah.
Just a side note. I know.
I think it's a great comment. And I mean, I know this is a bit of a diversion in a sense from what we're talking about, but I think this is going to come back around. And I think that with art and just like media and film, even if we want to even get specific there, but I mean, paintings and everything, it's a maturity process. Art, people don't always think about this. They don't always realize this, but when you're younger, you'll tend to watch very fluffy stuff, and you'll be attracted to almost a kind of and entertained by things that are quite simple, But as you get older, like that's why that's the dad joke. The dad joke is something where you can entertain a kid with something super silly because the kid's sense of humor and sense of exposure to media and just that type of world is so limited. So things are funny. Like, for example, I remember I was driving with my dad when I was like a real little kid. And I remember we're just driving along and I said, my favorite car is a Lamborghini. And he's like, a Lamborghini? And I was like, ha, I thought it was hilarious. I just remember that so specifically. And it's so silly, but like I was a little kid, and the fact that he took that word and he made it into something like, and my maturity was obviously limited because I was younger, right? Like lower.
Yeah.
And maturity develops as we watch content, so younger people tend to watch more like kind of more like actiony, like fluffier stuff. And then as you get older and you mature, you look into more like artistic, more emotionally depthy, profound stuff. Not everybody goes as far down the maturity road of media as they can, but there's something about that I find extremely interesting. And if you were to imagine a world where there was no media, just think about like no books, no anything. Can you imagine how underdeveloped we would be as a culture? Like media cultures us in so many ways. We learn so many things from it. And yeah, like people will say, well, I wasn't raised on television, like that'd be silly. But in a lot of ways we are. We're raised by, and I'm not just talking television, I'm talking books, I'm talking paintings, I'm talking music. Music affects us and moves us, and the lyrics in those songs, we grow and evolve through this stuff. And so I think that sometimes people will take their artistic expressions and they'll go, well, doesn't really matter. I got to take care of business. I got to make money. I got to pay these bills. And it's like, I would argue, and actually Gabe, when we had this great conversation, he was arguing that like, yeah, but that's a necessity. And if you're not doing that, if you're not exposing yourself to culture, and let's not just even talk art, let's talk culture, because this is a culture thing. You're missing out on an entire part of the socialization and community process of connection. And so being unapologetic about what you want, that's kind of you saying like, look, I have a part in what I'm trying to create, what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to expose myself to in the world. And that's kind of how I wanted to bring it around. And I have another point, but let me just kind of hear your thoughts now that I've said a whole speech.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, like I like that you brought it back around, because I'm just like, where, like, whoa, how did we land here?
I know, yeah.
But sometimes that happens and you just got to roll with it. It was it was a great little diversion. First thing I wanted to come back to was just a little thing of this person who wanted to start painting and was told to clean out the shed. In my head, the funny thing was, well, he should clean out the shed and turn it into an art studio.
Yeah. Totally.
Because how perfect would that be? It's like, you know what? That's a great idea.
Can I say one thing? Bill Burr's advice to him was like, he's like, what should I do? The guy's like, what should I do? And Bill Burr's advice was, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go down to the store and you're going to buy yourself an easel. And you're going to buy yourself something to paint with. That's the first thing you're going to do before you even have a conversation with the wifey and whatever. Like, you're going to go and you're going to do the thing because that's what you want to do. And I think that's a really good unapologetic advice,
Yeah.
Like, go get the thing to do the thing you want to do. That doesn't affect anybody, doesn't hurt anybody. If it's going to not, like, if you guys aren't going to be able to eat and you need to feed your children and it's gotten to that point, then maybe you got to like.
Yeah. I mean, it's this thing. It's not about ignoring responsibilities.
Yes.
It's not about that, but it's about creating room, which there is to do. Like, most of us can find room to do these, to nourish the creative capacities that we have and the creative capacities that need to have expression, that every single one of us on this planet need to give expression to, however the hell that is that you give expression to that thing. But there is a real need to do that. And it's time to stop, putting that off out of a sense of practicality. It's just like, oh, yeah, I gotta go and clean out the shed. It's just like, you can clean out the shed, but you can still paint.
Yes.
Like it's like it's we're insane people. Like very often when I take the time to think about it and look at it, and just this whole example, it's like we're insane. We're absolutely insane. We will put off the things that actually stir something up from deep within us, of excitement and passion and creation, and we'll say, well, but this, but that, it's like we'll gravitate towards the shit mundane things. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can find beauty in the mundane, but my God, like, go and paint something, pick up that guitar that's been sitting and collecting dust in the corner for the last, year or two. Like do these things that are nourishing to your soul and your creative being. I don't know if we've, was there something in specific that you wanted me to comment on?
Well, no,
everything
but
that you were saying,
I think you've commented on it in a way that has kind of furthered the point. And you brought in, just based on our conversation unfolding, and this is always how it goes, but you brought in how one of the important points you brought in, and I want to mention this, was that I don't know how you said it. So, rewind the podcast if you want to hear it. But listen, you said something like, it's not about, like, essentially what I heard is it's not about shucking your responsibilities and walking over people and that type of thing to get what you want. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, you have something in your heart that you want. And I love my friend Megan, her rules. I've said this on the podcast before, I'll say it again, but she teaches preschool or like, kindergarten, that type of thing, grade 1, 2, 3. And she has these rules. She says, don't hurt yourself, don't hurt anyone else, and don't break my stuff. And now she changed it. She just told me the other day, she said, now I say, don't hurt yourself, don't hurt anyone else, and don't break our stuff. R being the key word. She said it's a bit of a tweak and it's a bit of a game changer. And
it is, yeah.
I love this idea for adults. Don't break our stuff. Think of someone else's stuff as yours and theirs, and your stuff is theirs too. And look at it that way. Think about stuff, and I'm not just talking about material things. I'm talking about like relationships. I'm talking about things that are built. I'm talking about all that, right? And it's like, go for what you want unapologetically. But if it's going to hurt you, hurt someone else, or break something, then you need to take a moment to really consider, is this what I really want to do? Because for me personally, if I'm going to hurt somebody to get what I want, that makes me want to go, I need to be a little bit more mindful about just bulldozing through this. But if you can recognize, like, hey, I'm going to do this. And like, I'm not talking about hurt feelings, like jealousy and envy and that type of stuff. Like, that's bullshit. That's nonsense. Forget that. But I'm talking about like breaking your word. I'm talking about, physically harming somebody because you did something careless, that type of stuff. Don't do that. So you just brought up something that I thought was really important. It's like, go for what you want, and you don't need to apologize to go for what you want. But you do need to be mindful that what you're doing is not going to be like directly and obviously hurting someone or damaging something. There are ways where you will cause damages that are unknown to you, unforeseen, and you have to risk that and you'll learn. But if you knowingly know that you're going to hurt somebody, hurt yourself, or break something, and you know that that's a high chance, it's your responsibility to be considerate of that. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be considerate of it. Because I think that's an important part of this conversation.
Yeah, because like the hurt of somebody, it's like, maybe the person you're hurting is somebody who's been unsupportive of you this whole time, or isn't a person who's particularly good to you, and you doing something is, going to hurt them basically for all the wrong reasons. Like it's going to hurt them because of their bullshit, you
Yes.
know, in that case, like that's basically what, you know, you get into. That's a toxic person. That's a toxic person in your life. You know, it's like the person saying like, you know, go clean the shed. God, I really hope that this person works this out with their wife. Now it's just in my head. I'm just like, I really hope that they work that out, because, you know, that's troubling.
That is,
you know,
troubling.
when I hear something like that's disturbing. You know, when someone who's your life partner doesn't support something creative and that you have passion for, you know, like that's discouraging. You know, and that's something that needs to be confronted. That's a whole side issue.
I have something to say about that.
Yeah, go for it.
You build relationships with people, and you build reputation with people, and you build based on consistency, persistency, and how you show up. I have a client, for example, and last month we had a kind of a big moment, and he was the client. I was like, look, like we had a big talk, and this was in front of the whole class, and the class was getting frustrated, and it was difficult. But I was like, look, I don't know if you're making the cut for this class. Like this class functions at a certain level, and you're not doing that, right? So like we need to talk about this. And he was like, well, he's like, and his argument was like, but this class is helping me to succeed here, and now that I'm going to do that, I feel like you guys don't want me to. And it's like, we want you to. That's exactly what you're here to do. And that's exactly the point of why you're here, and everything is doing this. But because you've shown up late for X amount of classes, because you've missed classes without notice, because you've done this, you built a reputation with myself and with everyone else about how you show up in the world. And this conversation isn't about what you're doing today. This conversation is about how you've been showing up with consistency and persistency with this particular group of people. So when I look at this husband, for example, who says, I want to paint, with his wife, he might have been consistently like doing things that are, you know, so I want to kind of just put myself in her shoes for a moment and just be fair, because I know nothing about the details of that. But when you're
there
going
can always
for
be context that changes the picture.
And I don't even know if this is the context of that situation, but I want to say, like, when you're going for what you want, understand that if you earn respect from people, if you earn credibility with people, if you earn a consistency of keeping your word and doing things that you say you'll do, and you know, not being flighty, that type of stuff, they're going to give you a lot more room, a lot more real estate, a lot more territory to have your dream. So don't get mad at somebody immediately, because without context, she's obviously wrong. She's obviously got the wrong point of view. It's clear to everybody, I'm sure. But with context, you might go, well, she's not talking about what we think she's talking about. And I'm just throwing that in to be devil's advocate, because I think there's a lot of people out there that they go, well, I'm going to go for what I want. And then they create an enemy out of somebody who's maybe considered toxic or not supportive. And it's like, hold on a second. Are you building a relationship with them that's based on mutual respect, keeping your word, showing up consistently, not being flighty, these types of things? Because if you are, and they still are holding you back, that's toxic. But if you're not, and they're holding you back, you have to take that on the chin and say, look, I know before I pursued other things and they've been kind of like a fad, or they've been this thing or whatever. And, you know, I recognize my errors, but this thing now is important to me. And I realize that your experience of me has not been as solid as I would like it to be, but this is really important to me. You know, I've talked a lot about my dad on this podcast. He and I have a very, very interesting relationship, very hard relationship, but it's like, it has flowers in the apocalypse, as we've mentioned before. But he taught me something really important when I was younger, because I used to be like, well, I want to play guitar. I want to buy this downhill mountain bike. and I always wanted to try things, right? And he kind of showed me that when you kind of like want something and then you abandon it, there's a responsibility for wanting it, like getting a dog, for example. Like, you got the dog, now you got to clean up its shit. When you, like, for example, let's say it's painting, right? You got to, if it's going to make a big mess in the house, that has an effect on everybody else. So you got to clean up your paint. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't just get to paint and then leave it and then be like, whatever, I don't care. To some degree, I'm trying to make it comparable here. So you buy credibility with people by how you show up and how you clean up your messes and how you keep your word. So if you want more territory with people, you might say like, hey, I tried this thing out. I realized I wasn't really into it. I thought but I tried it and I wanted to. And now, I'm going to clean that up and move on. But if you pursue things, and I mean, I'm just thinking about a couple, right? It's like you're using each other's money to go pursue your passion. And then all of a sudden you abandon your passion. Maybe you have a better insight on this than me. I don't know. But like, you abandon your passion, it has a cost on the couple, right? So I'm just saying that I want to throw this in. Be unapologetic about what you want, but be considerate too at the same time. Don't just be mindless and selfish and self-involved about it. That's not what we're saying. And I know that you agree with that. But I think when it comes to relationships, we have a responsibility we don't need to apologize and we don't need to make excuses. But at the same time, we need to take accountability for how we show up, because
we need to make room.
Right.
There needs to be a space that we create for ourselves, within ourselves, obviously first and foremost, but in our environment as well, to give these things expression, to give these impulses. And again, like curiosities. We've had full conversations where we've talked about just how powerful and incredible curiosity is, how transformative curiosity is. And there's a being mindful, but we have to my light just hit the ditch. There needs to be room for all of those things to exist within our lives, because they are absolutely necessary for us to live and lead fulfilling and joyful lives. It's not a matter of just carelessly going around trampling over whoever it is in your life in pursuit of something. But I feel for most people that's not really what's happening. I think for the most part, people are, sitting on these things because they think that they're foolish for some reason. It's foolish, or it's stupid, or it's silly, or I don't know if I really,
or it's not going to get me anywhere.
It's not, which is a terrible reason to not do something.
100%.
Like what the fuck does that even mean anyhow?
Yeah.
That's not the way creativity works. Creativity and creation exists for itself. It's a celebration of itself. Sometimes there is rewards for it that come out of it, but that's not the reason for it. And you can look at, nature operates in this way. You can actually, I was reading this article, I don't even remember where it was now, but it was really funny because it was pointing out just how, in some ways, nature is very inefficient to a large degree. Like, a tree will shed how many nuts and seeds and whatever, that will never ever actually take root into anything. It's just this barrage of stuff for a creation, that may never actually happen, but it creates more than what is necessary in some ways. So it's like there's something somewhat superfluous about creation, even in nature. Sort of a side note to it. I don't know if I had to come back around on this one, but really, I think that we need to give room and entertain these things that, even if they are maybe just a curiosity right now, yeah, maybe you're not going to become a painter professionally and that's going to be your new vocation in life, but maybe it's something that you do on the weekends because, it's something that's calming and soothing and fulfills some, some unspeakable part of you.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you drop it all together and you go, it's like, you know what? I don't like painting, but what's really cool is charcoal sketching. I just go, it's like you find something, it just, it leads to the next thing. But to stifle that curiosity, to stifle that thing that's a part of you that wants to go and try things. I mean, I think that's honestly, that is one of the most honest human qualities that we possess, is just that thing that wants to, like, well, what if we try this? Let's try this. Let's go and do that. Like, I think that's like one of the most beautiful human impulses that we have. And one of the most absolutely natural things that we all do. And it just is madness to try and work against that.
Mm-hmm. I love that analogy about nature being inefficient and just that whole parable, because it's like so much of creativity is like that. It's like you just like drop these leaves, plant these seeds, like these things kind of just come out of you. And so much of it is not going to go anywhere. It's not going to do anything. But being creative in and of itself is part of the whole life experience. And I find, I work with a lot of people in creative realm, and I find that like a lot of people, they get so caught up in trying to do something well, trying to do it right, trying to do it perfect. And it's like, I always say this to writers all the time. I'm like, you got to be willing to write shit. You got to be willing to write terrible stuff. I mean, that's how you learn how to write good stuff. You write stuff that's bad, that's cliche and overly emotional and over directed with your writing. And you write all this stuff, and it's like, that's part of the learning process of figuring out how to write, is that's what you do. Like Bill Burr and Joe Rogan, a couple guys I really look up to from like just a creative standpoint, they talk about comedy, how you got to go up and you got to like basically bomb on stage. And that's part of the learning process of working out a bit. You try it. And they were sharing this story about how like a lot of the time there's certain, I guess, like places where they'll go, and lots of comedians will do this. They'll be like, they'll try a bit at a smaller audience. And some comedians will say like, that'll be funny in a couple months. Like, you know what I mean? But I'm working on something here. And, and they kind of just, the ones that get really good, they kind of talk with the audience, because the audience is there realizing like, hey, like this isn't your special. This isn't the most refined version of these bits, these jokes. Yeah. This is you coming up with an idea. And like, they were saying like, as a comedian, something's there, but you don't necessarily know how to deliver it or how to execute it or where to like take it, but something's there. And so it's something got to work, and you got to work. And so, if you listen to the best comedians and you listen to them really talk, openly, they'll say like, I bombed, I bombed here, I bombed there, and these experiences they've had. And that was how they learned. And like, why is any bit of art any different, and stand-up comedy is an art. Stand-up comedy is an art just as much as writing is, just as much as acting, as filmmaking, as painting, as playing guitar or the trombone or whatever the heck it is that you're doing. So I think here's another point, Evan. You got to be unapologetic for your practicing, unapologetic for making mistakes, for not being perfect, for not like just picking up the instrument and being like graced with the gift of God of like being able to play like, you name it, like the best musicians in the world, right? Like some people will have anomaly kind of almost like these special talents and abilities to just like, they can hear music and they can comprehend it, or they can comprehend something else, some other art medium in a certain way that not everyone can. And they're like almost borderline autistic. Like it's like a weird thing about them that they're able to do. And I don't think you should compare yourself to that, because that's an anomaly, right? That's a strange thing that occurs in our culture. But just because someone picks this thing up and is extremely good at it right off the bat doesn't mean that you can never be where like they want to go, or like
yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't mean that there isn't room for you, in there too. There's that, I've said this a number of times in the show, and I don't remember who said it. Classic. But
classic.
It goes something like, the forest would be awfully quiet if only the most beautiful songbirds sung.
Yes.
And I just absolutely love that one. It's because it's exactly what I'm trying to say here, which is like, there is room for you. There's more than enough room for you to do this thing, to go and to sing your song. You might not be, at the certain level of this person or that person, or achieve the level of notoriety and fame as this person or that person. It doesn't matter, because you have your audience, you have your people walking in your corner of the forest, who want to hear what you have to sing, so to speak. This is getting maybe a little bit sentimental.
Well, like there's so many different types of trees, for example, in the world. Maybe this sounds unrelated, but it isn't. There's so many different types of trees. I've been down, to Northern California. I've seen the redwoods that like are so massive. You're like, I don't even understand how a tree is this fucking big. Like, this is incredible, right? I've been around that. And I've also, walked in like rather newer forests comparatively that have these small little trees. And it's not like I'm like, the one forest is different than the next. But just because I'm not in the redwoods every time I go into nature doesn't mean that nature experience isn't worthwhile and valuable and important. So like, and there's so many other elements to the nature of what is created. So, you might like, and if you take that analogy, the forest would be awfully quiet if only the best songbirds sung, kind of idea. Well, if only the best songbirds sung, then only the best of the best would sing, and then only the best of the best of the best would sing. And then pretty soon there would be one bird singing and everyone else would be watching, and that would be all the music of birds ever. Yeah. And, the birds that are maybe not singing as well as the birds that are singing at the best, for example, the birds that aren't singing the best are learning how to sing. You know what I mean? And like, I think we have this weird relationship to expression and creativity where it's like, I can only do it if I'm good at it. I can only do it if I'm the best at it. And it's like, that's just not true. And it doesn't mean you can make money from it. It doesn't mean that you can compete based on where you're at, but it doesn't mean that you have to be quiet. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to do this thing. It doesn't mean you have to be inactive. And I think that there's an important line of this conversation, which is that just because you're new at it, just because you're maybe not good at it, maybe just because you haven't had the best teachers, you haven't learned or whatever, or maybe you're behind everybody, doesn't mean that you don't get to play too. And I think that you can be unapologetic for not being good at whatever you're doing. And if you're unapologetic and you're willing to try and you're willing to work at it and you're willing to learn, you will get better. And eventually, if you just keep getting better, if you just keep working at it, most things you will eventually find your way. But I think that this brings up a whole other element of like comparison, which is like a recipe for disaster. It's like apologizing for not being as good as someone else. Like, you don't have to apologize for that.
No. And and the thing is that like, even the best songbird, people will get tired of listening to it. You know what I mean? Like, we there's a reason why we love to listen. We have lots of different favorite bands and artists and whatever. And we have some that are we love more than others, but we don't just listen to the same person. We just don't just find this one person and we're like, all right, that's it forever. That's the only thing I'm ever listening to again.
Yeah.
And
That
this
would
might
be
seem,
like listen to one song for the rest
Yeah.
of your life and that's it.
yeah, you'd eventually, you get tired of it. You get tired of that songbird, so to speak, you know? And this might seem like a weird example, but it like popped into my head. I remember seeing this interview with Enrique Iglesias back in the day. I don't know. I wonder what he's doing these days. Is he still making music? I have no
I have
idea.
no idea. Yeah.
But you know, it's like for all of you people out there, if for our younger audience, Enrique was like up at the top for a while, you know, like he was one of the biggest pop stars in the world. And I just remember seeing this interview with him, and he was saying, I am not the best singer in the world. He's like, I'm not even close to the best singer in the world or musician or, you know, the most technically knowledgeable about music. He's like, I just try to do what and write the music and do what I do as honestly and truthfully to me as I can possibly do it. You know, and I had such tremendous respect for that statement. You know, like it's exactly what we're talking about here, which is like, yeah, like I'm not the most incredible singer. I'm not the best I'm not the best at pretty much anything, you know, in music, if we're talking objectively, technically speaking. Like not like there's hundreds, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people probably that are more accomplished than he is. But it's a testament to the fact that there is some other ingredient. There's something else that goes into this whole soup, so to speak. You know, like it's not just about being the absolute best. It's great to try and be as like, what's that thing? It's like, don't try to be better than other people. Just try and be better than yourself yesterday. Mm-hmm. You know, like just trying to be for you to do better all the time, to set your personal best all the time. Because yeah, the whole comparison thing, as you were alluding to, you know, and I think we've talked about this before. I'm almost guaranteed we've talked about this before about comparison, but like, you know, comparison is really a dishonoring of yourself, you know, like, you know, like be like, you can admire other people. You can appreciate what other people bring to the table. You can be inspired by what other people bring to the table. By all means, take all of the inspiration that you can get, but don't let that diminish you. That doesn't ever have to diminish you in any way. There's still a space for you to be and to exist and to create what it is that you create.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting when like, you know, just we don't really know. We don't know what we're doing, like how impactful that is. We don't know what difference it's making, how people are responding to it. I mean, we get such little data on that, really. Like, and we try to quantify it by how much fame does a person have, or how much money do they make, or, you know, what are the impacts and stuff. But I had one of my clients say to me, you know, they said, see, you don't know, because right now you might be doing the most important work in the world. And when they said that to me, I was like, I just tried it on for a moment. I'm like, well, what if that was true? Like, what if the work that we're doing is the most important stuff in the world right now? But I'm like, who, me? Who, me? Like, I'm even capable of doing anything that's like even close to being the most important work in the world. But that's the thing about when you're really truly trying to do something in your life, you don't know. You just don't know. And I mean, objectively, is it the most important work in the world? I don't know. But like, to that person, maybe it is the most important work in the world. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so I think that this whole thing about like what you want, what you're trying to do, you know, like with the course that I've been working on and the couple courses that I've been developing, you know, they're very, very important to me. And I want to do them. I feel like they're important. And I feel like they're things that people need in the world. And it's because for me, when I look at myself and my life, I'm like, this is what I would have wanted created for me. You know what I mean? And I've worked with coaches who have helped me refine it and helped me like bring it to another level and up the game. And I've learned how to give people like an integration every time they work with me. I've learned how to give them simple steps. I've learned how to be patient with people, how to make them clear that they don't need to conquer the entire world on day one. You know, I've learned these skills. And then I had one coach that said, look, you're going to take your life story, whatever it is that you want to teach, but we're going to take your life story and you're going to teach that through your story. And they helped me to like really tell my story and then teach what I'm doing. And they're like, see, when you do it this way, it's proprietary. Nobody could ever even try to compete with what you're doing here. Not that it's better or worse than anyone else's, but it's absolutely 100% true because it's you and it's your story and you lived it and no one else has the authority on that but you. And when I'm talking about going for what you want and being unapologetic for it, that's what I'm talking about. And that's like one of those things that like, I wish that I heard that when I was younger, that like, I didn't have to be better than everybody. I didn't have to compare with people. What I had to do was really try to tell my story truthfully through me in acting, in filmmaking, in writing, whatever that was. We talked about this in a last podcast, I think. Maybe the podcast before, I talked about the Love Lost script. Mm-hmm. That was the first script I wrote where I finally just told my truth in a story. And it wasn't about trying to do some jig, you know? Like it was like, here's a story. And this is like, and I'm not saying it's perfect and I'm not saying it's the best script I'll ever do. But it was like the first time where I was like, what if I just told the truth? And unapologetically, ironically, now that we're talking about this, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, what if I unapologetically told the truth? And one of the unapologetic things that I wanted to approach in the script was fidelity, loyalty, honesty, relationships of truth. And I wanted to talk about betrayal. I wanted to talk about that stuff. And I wanted to bring people through an experience of what it means, what it feels like. I wanted them to feel betrayal. Like if you had never experienced betrayal before, and then you tasted this script, like tasted it, and you just had that sour, bitter feeling. And it's like, you never know what that's like until you live it. And when a script can make you have that in your, you know, that feeling, that experience, like, that wasn't because I'm like a really good writer and I know how to do that as much as it is I felt betrayal. I know what that feels like. And here's an experience and I'm going to hit you where it hurts me. So if this doesn't hurt you, then wow. And people cried. People cried. One person told me he threw down the script and then picked it back up and read it because like it hit him so hard. Right. And I'm like, that's unapologetic. Yeah. And I honestly, like, I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this script's going to work. I don't know if anybody's going to like it. People might like hate it because I did this. And I wanted to also talk about, sorry, I just want to bring this up. I have a friend who was addicted to drugs and I want to approach that, but I wanted to approach it from not like, oh, this person lives on the street and they're all cracked out. Like, you know, I want to talk about it from a person who's like, a normal person who would be your best friend, who you'd never know even had a drug problem. And then I want to approach this story from a place where this seemingly perfectly capable, successful person had a drug problem and what that looks like. Because I saw that in my friend and geez, it makes me emotional because it's like I had him cry in my shoulder, you know, and he turned the corner on this thing. But it had him by the throat, man. And I wanted to approach that with the script and show people what I saw. That's unapologetic, man. But the great thing about writing a script is you can do it without naming names, without telling who that was, you know, and you can kind of share an experience as opposed to like, by the way, it's a gossip thing about this person, you know, and it's hard, man. It's hard to do this stuff. But when we're talking about this conversation, man, it's just like this conversation is opening up so many things for me again, like they all do. But like, it's like, I want to encourage people to try to venture into that world that's just like this untapped territory where they just feel like that's too dangerous and I offend people. someone wrote me back for feedback. They said, I don't like scripts where people do drugs, especially openly or like, like this. And I said, fair, because I was unapologetic about how I entered it into the story, and some people were okay with it. And there was a few people who were like, and it's like, that's just part of the game, man. That's part of trying to communicate something.
Yeah. Not everybody's going to like it. And, you know, you're not necessarily the voice for them. It doesn't make your voice less than as a result of it. Right. I wanted to bring this in because you sent me this quote and I was like, oh, that's so good. Like last week after our recording last week, you sent me this Hemingway quote, which was like, write hard and clear about what hurts. I was like, oh my God, Hemingway, like oh my God. Like if you haven't ever read Hemingway, for me at least, like it took me years to read anything from Ernest Hemingway. And, cause he's just one of those names and, everyone's just like, people would argue is like the greatest one. People will argue that he is the greatest writer of all time. Whatever, that doesn't really mean anything, but you can go and you can read his stuff for yourself and just how does what he says and writes, how does that hit you? How does that make you feel? But yeah, he is such an incredible writer, and he just had this way of, because like even that simple statement in and of itself, write hard and clear about what hurts. Like such a short, concise statement. Like the statement encompasses everything that he was communicating in it.
Yes.
It was hard and it was clear, and there's something about that statement that hurts a little bit. Because he's confronting just what it can be to hurt as a human being.
Totally.
And just to say it, like I was just like, I just meditated like on that quote for like a little while after you said it to me. Cause I was just like, that is so unbelievable. Like such incredible words. And that's just that's a statement that's unapologetic.
Yes. It's something that, that I remind myself of occasionally. And I mean, I don't personally know where things will go for me as a writer, storyteller, screenwriter, novelist. I don't really know, but it's a medium that I truly am in love with, because it has been something that I feel has altered me as a person. It's given me such a richness to my life that anything I ever wanted from it has already been served to me tenfold because of just writing, and if I ever make a further career out of it, or if it ever goes anywhere or not, I don't know if that'll happen or not. And I don't know if I even want that. I'm not sure, but I love writing. I love storytelling, and I love experiencing that. And since I wrote that script, which was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, it changed. Like after that point, it just changed everything that occurred for me as a writer. It's just altered my whole trajectory. And I remind myself of that quote, write hard about what hurts, basically. And there's another writer. I just want to mention this because I actually got you to read his book, Bret Easton Ellis. And he wrote that book, Less Than Zero. I remember.
Oh God.
I remember I'm like, Evan, you got to read this book. And to me, that was another one of those books that was like, I felt that book. Like I felt that book in a way that was like, this is what it's like when you have no purpose, but you have everything. Mm-hmm. You have everything you want, but no purpose. And it's just so like, and he really, in my experience of that book, really gave me a feeling of like, this is the emptiness of success or like abundance without purpose. It's just vapid and like empty, and the relationships are empty. And I remember a particular moment in the script, and I won't ruin it for anybody who's interested in reading it, but there was a moment in that particular script where my gut dropped, and I was like, oh, and I was just like, oh my God. And I just, I just saw how it put into context the entire book and what was happening and how meaningless everything was becoming and how bad that was. And I just realized, like, you got to have more in life than just money and women and cars and success and stuff like this. And I mean, that sounds very obvious to say on a surface level, but to feel that on your gut level, that's a whole other thing. And that's what a writer did, you know? And I feel like artists have that ability. And I know I'm kind of talking about that, but like, for him to write that story was so unapologetic. It was so unapologetic about youth in that current generation, in that place in the world, in Los Angeles. And like, it was just such an unapologetic look at a certain, sub-society, subculture of our world that really had an expression of a certain thing that we admire. And it's just such an excellent experience. And I think, like, if he was apologetic about it, you would never get that experience. And you know, that's something.
You never get the full expression, the full feeling of everything would not come through.
Right. You know, and when they made the movie, because they made a movie of this book, they, in my opinion, they were apologetic about it. They were safe. I
mean, because the book was like, especially where it kind of winds up.
Yeah.
Towards the end, it's just like, ugh, like it's horrifying, and no doubt that upset people.
No kidding.
And it was like upset it too, but like, in a book you could sort of get away with it, but in a movie that was maybe something like, we can't get away with this.
Yeah, they watered it
try
down.
And do this. But yeah, it's interesting.
Well, that's what we're saying though. We're saying, like, don't water it down. I mean, like, other people will water your stuff down because they can't handle it. And if you read a novel and it gets turned into a movie, they're going to try to water it down probably, but don't water your own stuff down. Don't apologize for it. That's kind of the point I'm making.
Yeah. And, just as you're talking about this, and I thought about this last week too, when you were talking about your script, and I was just like, if you're, in an artistic field and you've never done this, like, try creating something that's honestly for nobody but you. That's just something that you're doing it because you want to do it. Just put it out of your head that it's for anyone or for anything, or that has to do something or whatever. What would you create? What would you write? What would you paint? What song? What would those lyrics be? What would it sound like? Whatever the hell it is, what would that be like to you? What is that thing that would come out of you if you allowed yourself to do that? Because it's a game changer. It's a game changer when you have that experience of yourself and that experience of yourself creating something, because it will impact everything you do going forward. You can still get commissioned by this person or that person or this organization or, whatever it is after that point. But you will begin to inject a certain kind of quality into your work from that point onwards, because you're going to glimpse something that there's no going back from. Like, will it be that thing every single time? No. But there will be something inside it, that's beyond what you used to do before.
I think that's such an important part of the whole process, is writing for yourself, writing or painting or playing music or doing whatever you're doing, like, for yourself, for you as the audience member. And it's a strange thing. It's like you're doing it because you enjoy it and because you feel called to tell the story, but without the judgment of other people looking at it. It's like when you create from a place of, like, I don't really care if anyone else sees this, it gives you a tremendous amount of freedom. because I feel like why people apologize is they constantly feel like they're stepping on someone else's toes or they're offending them, or especially now with outrage culture and everything. It's like,
Yeah.
like, look, you're gonna offend people. You're gonna upset them. One person wrote back about the script, like, I've been sharing all the positive stuff. Someone wrote back, well, the guy doesn't really do anything. And I'm like, it's because he's fucking depressed. But I'm just like, okay, fair enough. That's how you interpret it. But I'm like,
Yeah.
other people got the point of this particular character. And yeah, he's right. I mean, in a script, your characters are supposed to be active and going for whatever they want. But I'm like, from a certain point of view, I'm like, yeah, he's not like, this isn't Mission Impossible. He's not Tom Cruise trying to save the world here. He's a guy who's fucked up in his life and he's trying to figure some things out. So,
that is the action that's going on underneath the surface. But it's like,
exactly.
yeah, it's funny because there are a lot of these little rules and things that are like come up in different sort of crafts and arts and whatever it is. Like, say, oh, you got to make sure you like that, like all your characters got to be active and well, it's like, yeah, like to a certain extent, for sure, because we're trying to create something that's compelling, but at the same time, we're also trying to give voice to things that are real, and that's a real thing. There are people who have a hard time being someone who takes action.
Right.
And like, does that person just not get to have a voice? Does that person not get an expression in our mediums? Do we just not confront that part? Are we just going to idolize people who are just action takers all the time? And just sweep this whole, issue under the rug like it doesn't exist. Like it's kind of crazy, right? That's a side note, but
it's a good note. It's a good note because it's like, I feel like a lot of the time we're trying to appease what people want and we're trying to appease the rules of our art. And it's like, sometimes you got to be unapologetic about that. I've written for 20 years. At that point I had written for, I don't know, 16. And it's like, at that point I knew that he wasn't very active. And I'm like, he probably needs to be a little more active. Like there was a subtle little part of me that's going like, but I'm like, I'll figure that out later. Like I'm just writing, I'm working this out. But like, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who aren't like super active in their life. They don't know what to do. They're feeling a little aimless. They're walking around feeling like, what's the fucking point? And then you have a story that comes along and you have a character that's sitting in that and you get to ride with them as they work it out. That could be extremely helpful to you. So maybe, and this is the other thing too, is like the movie business is such an interesting business because there's so much pressure to always like be like, we need to get this out. It needs to be like massive, like there is a big pressure about how is this going to make money. And the more people that see it, because I mean, a movie ticket's like what, $8 to $15 basically these days. And like buying a movie, and then most people are watching things on streaming, and then so many people are downloading it and whatever. So you're trying to get enough money to justify spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on this thing. So there's a pressure, right? And so as a writer, if you're like, well, I want to get this thing made, there's a lot of like, well, I need to do these things so that people will enjoy it and will see it. And it's like, yeah, but that's apologizing in a certain way. It's apologizing because you don't think that telling the truth is good enough. And maybe it is, but you'll never know unless you try.
Oh man, people will thank you for being able to tell the truth about something. Right. If you can be hard and clear about it, holy shit, man, people will worship you.
Yeah.
In a strange way. Let's wrap this one up.
Okay, man.
Let's wrap this one up. Let's talk about what what kind of suds we're drinking quickly. Again, for if you are a regular listener to the show, you know that this is not any kind of sponsorship. We just like to drink a nice craft brew when we have these conversations. It's where the conversation started from, and we just carry on the tradition. So for myself, I'm just drinking Hazy Pale Ale, Steamworks Hazy Pale Ale.
Solid beer.
Solid, man. It's delicious. They're consistently strong. You know, like I don't, and they produce a lot of different kinds of beers and they try a lot of different kinds of stuff. And I think of all of the things I've had from them, I think there's only one thing I've ever had that wasn't my thing. And it was like a sour or something, you know, but I'm just not a big sour guy. So there you go.
Well, that's good, man. I'm having Hoyne Brewing Co. And this one's called Helios. I don't know how to say that. Can you say that?
It looks sexy.
Yeah. It's called a Dortmunder Golden Lager.
A Dortmunder Golden.
A Dortmunder. Well, it's like a strong beer. So 6%. Yeah. But anyway, it's real tasty. It's a really tasty, delicious beer. And I have enjoyed it thoroughly as I have this conversation.
Excellent.
Let's wrap this baby up, and I'm going to go first, if you don't mind.
No, yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
So, you know, there was a lot of things that we talked about, and wrapping this one up is difficult to like narrow down a specific point. But I want to say that anytime that you're judging something, yourself, the creative thing you're doing, some curiosity you have, that's apologizing. And I want to just put that out there because I feel like people think apologizing is like, oh, sorry, you know, I did something wrong. No, doing something wrong is stopping yourself from pursuing a creative pursuit or a curiosity or a direction you want to go with your art that doesn't seem to follow the rules. So the thing I want to leave people with is learn the rules, learn the things that, you know, that offend people, learn all that stuff, figure it all out, sure. But then when you really want to take some risks, when you really want to go and find out what you're made about, be willing to step on people's toes a little bit. Not because you're trying to hurt them, but because you know that just because people feeling something isn't a bad thing, even if it's sadness or even if it's like anger, or even if it's some feeling, because sometimes that's exactly what people want. And, you know, a friend of mine who read the script that I wrote, it touched on some subject matter that he ended up later experiencing betrayal in this particular way. And it was something that had informed him about looking at relationships in a way he had never looked at before. Because on a very basic level, someone betrays you, our immediate and most obvious response is that person's bad. I hate them. I don't like them. They're no good. They're toxic. They're whatever. But betrayal doesn't work like that. What often happens with betrayal, in my experience, is you still love the person and you hate them at the same time. And it's such a difficult thing to navigate. And sometimes you can still feel hurt by a person and still love them. And this script really gets into that kind of territory. So what I'm saying is that sometimes you want to approach something, it's as much for your audience as it is for you. Because when I wrote that script, I also learned something. Because I really was like, instead of me just being angry, instead of me just kind of like judging this person and saying they're bad and wrong, like and these situations that have occurred in my life, why don't I really look at it? Why don't I look at it like in my deep, deep heart, you know, and find out what's in there? And that's why I cried when I wrote the script, because I'm like, motherfucker, I love this person and I still love them and they hurt me so badly, you know? And it's like, so many of us are dealing with that. It's a part of life, and it's such a hard part of life. But like, it's so much better to find the humanity in these things than to just walk around with this black and white view of that person's bad and I hate them. Because all you do is you just bury all that stuff inside you. And I found that finding the love was what led me to forgiveness and led me to personal freedom. And some of these people, they're not in my life anymore, and I don't want them in my life anymore. And they never probably will be. And that doesn't mean that the love and that feeling isn't there, you know, because love is such a profound thing that we have generations and millennia to explore, to even find out what it is. So be unapologetic about exploring these territories, guys. That's all I'm going to say. I don't know what that means for you, but like, don't try and do it to appease where everyone else is. None of us really know anything. And we're looking to you a lot of the time to help us find a new experience of this stuff. So that's kind of my thought on this topic, is be unapologetic about exploring the depths of yourself and your creativity.
That's all great.
Thanks.
Yeah. I think for myself to just cap this one off is that, it is through what you want unapologetically. And by what you want to express, what you want to create unapologetically. It's only when you do it in that way, with that kind of spirit and attitude towards it, where you really begin to touch upon what it is that you are really made of, where you discover where you are better and greater than you thought you were. That's where you touch that part of you that is so much more, than you even imagined. And then you can go even further from there, and even further from there, and even further from there. So begin to give these impulses that you have, your creative impulses that you have, give them their time, give them their space, allow them to come into being, and do that with as much force of who you are as possible. And you will begin to know yourself in a way that you didn't know was possible.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you got something out of this, if you feel it improved your life or your journey in any way, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode.
You can also support us on Patreon, where we have tons of great bonuses. You are the ones that make the show possible and help us to thrive. Thank you for joining us.